Ghosts and creeps are scary if they are in your house. But if you are in an unknown house, what do you do to escape them? Let's find out. Story 1. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend away. My friends and I had booked an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but trees and wildlife. It was perfect, a chance to escape the city and enjoy some peace and quiet. But as soon as we arrived, things felt off. The Airbnb was a creepy old cabin with creaky floorboards and a musty smell that seemed to linger in the air. The host, a woman named Rose, was friendly enough, but there was something about her that made us all feel uneasy. That first night, we settled in and cracked open a few beers. But as the sun began to set, we started to hear strange noises outside. At first, we thought it was just the wind rustling the trees, but then we heard footsteps. Heavy, lumbering footsteps that seemed to be getting closer and closer. We all froze, too scared to move. Suddenly, there was a loud banging on the door. We could hear someone trying to force their way in. We looked at each other, terrified, not knowing what to do. Finally, the banging stopped, and we heard the sound of footsteps retreating. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too scared to even talk. The next morning, we decided to leave. We didn't care how much money we had already spent on Airbnb. We just wanted to get out of there. But when we went to talk to Rose, she was nowhere to be found. As we were packing up our things, we discovered something that made our blood run cold. In one of the drawers, we found a newspaper article about a serial killer who had been active in the area years ago. His name was Robert Rose, and he had never been caught. Suddenly, everything made sense. The strange noises, the heavy footsteps, the banging on the door, it was all the work of Robert Rose, still stalking the woods all these years later. We got out of there as fast as we could, but the memory of that night still haunts us. And I cannot help but wonder, who else has stayed at that Airbnb, unaware of the danger that lurks in the shadows? Story 2. I had always loved traveling, but as a broke college student, I could not afford to stay in fancy hotels. So when I discovered Airbnb, I was thrilled. I had stayed in a few places before, but none of them had been as strange as the one I booked for my trip to Portland. The owner of the Airbnb was a woman named Sarah, and she seemed nice enough at first. She welcomed me warmly when I arrived, showed me around the house, and even offered me a cup of tea. But as the days went on, I started to notice some strange things. Sarah was always hovering around me, asking me questions and watching me as I cooked in the kitchen. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time, like Sarah was monitoring my every move. Then, one night, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like someone was rummaging around in my room. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and saw Sarah standing in the corner of the room. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Sarah just smiled and said, "I was just checking on you, making sure you were sleeping okay." I did not believe her, but I was too scared to argue. I just lay back down in bed and waited for her to leave. The next day, I decided to confront her about what had happened. But when I tried to bring it up, she just smiled and said, "Oh, you must have been dreaming. You know how your mind can play tricks on you." I knew I was not dreaming, but I did not want to argue with her. I just wanted to get out of there. That night, I went to bed early, hoping to get some rest before I left in the morning. But as I was lying in bed, I heard the sound of footsteps outside my door. Then I heard the lock being turned. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and saw Sarah standing in the doorway. "Is everything okay?" she asked, a smile on her face. I did not answer. I just grabbed my things and ran out of the house as fast as I could. Later, I found out that Sarah had a history of stalking and harassing her guests. I was lucky to have gotten out when I did. But the memory of that Airbnb owner, lurking in the shadows, still haunts me to this day. What would you do if you were in that Airbnb? Let us know in the comments below. Story 3. It was meant to be a fun weekend away with friends. We had booked an Airbnb in the countryside, excited to escape the city and enjoy some fresh air. But as soon as we arrived, things were all over the space. The Airbnb was an old farmhouse with creaky floorboards and dusty furniture. There was a strange smell in the air, like old roses and damp earth. But we were too excited to let it bother us. We settled in and cracked open a few beers. As the sun began to set, we lit a fire and started telling ghost stories. But as we were getting ready to go to bed, strange things started happening. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside my door. At first, I thought it was just one of my friends getting up to use the bathroom. But then I heard a faint whispering. I got up to investigate, but when I opened the door, there was no one there. The next morning, we all compared notes. Everyone had heard strange noises during the night, footsteps, whispering, even the sound of someone breathing right next to them. At first, we tried to brush it off, convincing ourselves that it was just our imaginations. But as the days went on, the strange occurrences became more and more frequent. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and we would sometimes catch glimpses of a figure standing in the corner of the room. Finally, we decided to investigate. We did some research and discovered that the farmhouse had been built on the site of an old cemetery. The bodies had been moved, but it seemed that some restless spirits had decided to stay behind. We tried to leave, but the ghosts had other plans. They started blocking the doors and windows, trapping us inside. We were terrified, not knowing what to do. But then one of my friends had an idea. She suggested that we perform a ritual to try and appease the ghosts. We were skeptical, but we were willing to try anything. We lit candles, burned sage, and recited a prayer. And slowly but surely, the ghosts started to disappear. The house was no longer haunted, and we were able to leave unscathed. However, one of our friends, Sam, started to vomit out blood and died. Many people say that the ghosts killed him because of our ritual. It's been a few years now, but the memory of those ghosts and Sam still haunts us to this day. We never expected to encounter the supernatural during an Airbnb stay, but sometimes you never know what you are going to get. And that's all from this video. Stay tuned for more. Until then, let us know in the comments below if you have had any recent experiences.